Chapter 4. The Handbook for Enlightenment. The next day I awakened to a freezing dawn. I got out of bed and hastily put on my clothes and down parka. I was very hungry. The candles I had lit when I had fallen asleep had burned themselves out, and the only light in the room was the faint, cold gray light of dawn that filtered in through some makeshift windows covered with old plastic. After leaving my room, I proceeded to make my way down the hall. Entering the meditation room, I saw Master Fwop and the Oracle sitting in front of an altar engaged in meditation. Moving as silently as I could, I walked up behind them, sat down, assumed a cross-legged position, and tried to meditate with them. It was easy at first. My mind was completely at rest, and I didn't think at all. Then I began to feel hungry. No matter how hard I tried to make my mind quiet and continue to meditate, I kept picturing every type of breakfast food imaginable. I thought of scrambled eggs and buttered toast, pancakes dripping with syrup, hash browns, orange juice, milk, coffee, cereal, and even Pop-Tarts. Then my stomach began to growl. It was awful. The high ceilings of the stone meditation room amplified the gurgling sounds of my stomach. Here I was in the presence of two aged Buddhist monks who were engaged in deep meditation, visualizing American breakfast foods. Master Fwop and the Oracle then began giggling, and what started out as chuckles quickly progressed to howls of laughter. They both turned and looked at me with tears in their eyes. I was really embarrassed, to say the least. Simultaneously, they became silent and stared at me. As they stared, I began to feel a pleasantly warm, tingling sensation that filled my body and numbed my senses. My mind became quiet. All thoughts of food and hunger vanished, and I found myself closing my eyes, stopping my thoughts, and effortlessly meditating again. When I reopened my eyes, Master Fwop and the Oracle were touching their heads to the cold stone floor, signaling that their morning meditation period had ended. I did my best to emulate their bows, touching the stone floor with my forehead. While I still didn't understand the purpose of all of the bowing that everyone did in Nepal, I figured it was polite to go along with it. Then Master Fwop and the Oracle stood up, stretched, and told me that it was time to go to the kitchen for something to eat. We all walked down a dark and narrow corridor to the back of the Oracle's temple, where we entered a small room that contained an old wooden table, several chairs, and a fireplace. The Oracle proceeded to light a small fire in the fireplace, and then hung an old metal kettle on a hook over the flames. Master Fwop disappeared into a small pantry and quickly returned with bread, butter, and cheese. When the tea was ready, the three of us sat down at the table together. The Oracle poured the tea, while Master Fwop gave us each large portions of bread, cheese, and butter on some worn-out china plates. All of this was done in complete silence. The only sounds to be heard were the first songbirds of morning and Master Fwop's quiet humming. After eating in silence for several minutes, Master Fwop began, "Today you will go to Kathmandu. It is a long journey. When you become tired, sit and rest, and read a little from the book I gave you last night. It will refresh you and renew your strength. The young woman you will meet tonight in Kathmandu is someone you have known in many of your past lives. You two have been very close before, as I'm sure you will be again." A sudden grin appeared on his face as he said this, and then both he and the crazy Oracle began to weep again with laughter. "Once you have become close," he said while trying to suppress his grin, "come to my monastery. The Oracle and I will be waiting for you there. Then the three of us will begin our journey to the Annapurna Range, where we will help you to solve the riddle of the missing dimensions." I thanked both the Oracle and Master Fwop for their hospitality. The Oracle then laughed, jumped up from his chair, and without warning, leaped effortlessly onto the top of the table. He swiftly raised both of his arms toward the ceiling and started taking in a series of very intense, deep breaths. I was dumbfounded by both his antics and the effortlessness of his jump. As an extreme snowboarder, I knew a lot about jumping, and I didn't understand how the Oracle could move the way he just had. But before I could give the matter more thought, he lowered both of his arms, aimed his outstretched palms at me, and made a loud, blowing sound. It was as if I were hit by a lightning bolt. Everything in my visual field went white, and I was knocked off my chair and onto the cold stone floor beneath me. I tried getting back up, but my muscles wouldn't work. All I could do was to lie on my back and listen to Master Fwop's and the Oracle's crazy peals of laughter. After several minutes, the white light faded, and the room came back to normal. I was able to sit up again. Master Fwop and the Oracle were still chuckling at my expense, and I immediately decided that this had all gotten too weird for me. Somehow, I managed to get up on my feet and leave the room as rapidly as possible. I ran back to my room, got my snowboard and backpack, and was about to leave when I remembered the book. Turning back to the bed, I grabbed the Handbook for Enlightenment, stuffed it into my backpack, and left the room. After leaving the temple, I started down the hill toward the rock and gravel road. As I walked down the grassy hill toward the road that led to Kathmandu, I ventured a quick backward glance over my shoulder at the Oracle's temple. Master Fwop and the crazy Oracle were standing at the temple's front door, still laughing and waving farewell to me. I waved back and rapidly walked down to the road. I spent the next several hours jogging. Whatever the Oracle had done to me in the kitchen had filled me with energy. I was literally running up and down 17 and 18,000-foot passes as if I were Superman. After about 3 hours, I suddenly became very tired. I had reached the top of a particularly gnarly snow and ice-covered pass when I suddenly felt that if I didn't sit down and rest immediately, I would pass out. Unshouldering my backpack and snowboard, I lay down. I was dizzy with waves of exhaustion. It was then that I noticed that my clothes were completely soaked through with perspiration. I wasn't so sure that the Superman empowerment, or whatever it was that the Oracle had done to me that had charged me up with so much energy in the kitchen, was such a good idea. Then I remembered Master Fwop's advice about the book the Oracle had given me. I fished around inside my backpack until I found it. Looking at it in the clear light of day, it seemed less impressive than it had by candlelight in the Oracle's monastery the evening before. I opened the book to the first page and began to read. O nobly born, in your hands you hold the distillation of the wisdom of the great tantric masters of the Rachor Swa's order of Tibetan Tantric Yoga. Because of your good karma from past ages, you have found your way back to the path. This book is the distilled elixir of Dharma practices. Pay close attention to that which follows. It will lead you on the short path to the clear light of reality, the celestial state of Buddhahood, where the world as you know it will stop, and the pain of sentient existence will come to an end. Be diligent in your practice. Be patient. You will succeed in your task in this world. Your task is consciously to rejoin the stream of perfect consciousness that abides both in and around all things. Once you have accomplished this, you may choose to pass into oblivion, Nirvana, for all time. Or you may choose to stay in the dimensional worlds, to play, or to help others along the pathway to enlightenment. The choice will be yours. May your path be filled with great joy. After reading the introduction, I closed the book and placed it on my snowboard. I lay my head back against my backpack, closed my eyes, and relaxed. I must have fallen asleep for a few minutes. I found myself in a dream. In my dream, I was back in the youth hostel in Kathmandu. I was sitting upright on my sleeping bag, and across from me was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had long blonde hair that ran halfway down her back. Her skin was pale and smooth. She wore a turtleneck sweater and blue jeans. Her tight white spandex turtleneck sweater sinuously revealed her firm, prominent breasts. She was thin-waisted and definitely very sexy. She smiled playfully at me, and then took my hand and held it. As she did, I felt an electric pulse flow between our two bodies. "You are coming to me," she said. "It will not be long now. I have waited for you for many lives. It is our time again." She took my hand, raised it, and allowed me to touch her breasts. Then she raised my hand and placed it on her heart. Suddenly, I was engulfed with warm and happy emotions. A series of scenes then began to pass before my mind's eye. In the scenes, I saw the two of us together, but we were in different bodies and in a different dimension. We were sitting by a large river. She was dressed in a purplish robe. We sat together without talking, watching the boats with their multicolored blue and white sails quietly moving along the river. Sitting next to her, I felt as if we were one being in two bodies. There was a timeless feeling, as if the two of us had always been sitting here, by this river, together, in this dimension, and always would be, no matter where our physical bodies might be. I turned and looked at her. Her eyes shined with the brightness of the sun on a cloudless day. I was overpowered by love, but this seemed strange to me. I don't think I had really ever loved anyone, except for Master Flop and a few of my snowboarding buddies. I had certainly never felt this close to a woman before. Before I had a chance to consider this matter further, I woke up. Strange dream, I thought. I stood up, stretched and yawned, and then, after reshouldering my gear, I started hiking at a much slower pace toward Kathmandu. After several hours of hiking, I took another break. It was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I figured I had covered about half the distance to Kathmandu. Sitting down on some meadow grass, I decided to check out the Handbook for Enlightenment again. I pulled it out of my backpack and opened it to the first chapter, The Short Way of Meditation. Meditation is a practice of making your mind still. Stillness is your mind's natural state. It is only when you become agitated by your surroundings, by things that you desire or fear, that you lose your natural state of mental equilibrium and fall into confusing and degenerate lower states of mind. Your mind should always be engaged in meditation. Strive to make it happy, calm, centered, and still. Unhappiness, fear, depression, and frustration are unnatural states of mind. They are the result of leaving your mind's innate state of enlightenment. The world around you changes constantly. There is little or nothing you can do about it. Try. Change the world today to what you want or how you think it should be. If you are able to do this, you will discover in a short while that everything you have changed will change again into something different, and that you will be frustrated and disappointed by this. This is not to suggest that you should be passive in your life. It is important to have goals and to strive for the things in life that you are naturally drawn to. The important point to understand is not to get attached to what you want to have happen to yourself or others, or to the events and outcomes that you wish to occur in this or any other incarnation. Try your best to be your best. Meditate and quiet your mind. Then you will always know what the Dharma is, that which is spiritually correct for yourself. By following the Dharma, as opposed to your human desires and fears, you will become happy and free. Sometimes the Dharma and your desires will be in agreement. Sometimes they will not be. But you must fight always to do the right thing, whether it brings you personal gain or loss. This is the true way of Vajrayana Buddhism, the path of the awakened warrior. The path of the awakened warrior is not an escape from reality. It is an entrance into reality. If you seek to escape from day-to-day reality, you will only increase your pain. The reality of enlightenment takes you above mental and emotional pain while you actively live in the world. Reality cannot be separated from your physical life. Samsara is nirvana. Enlightenment and all of life are one. Suffering is not caused by living in the material world and having experiences here. True suffering is caused by losing touch with your inner light. When you lose touch with your inner light, you will descend into lower samsaric states of consciousness. Here, you will become attached to people, places, and experiences in this and other worlds. This attachment will cause you to suffer intensely. It is your attachment to people, places, things, desires, and fears that causes you to suffer. The daily practice of meditation will allow you to live in the world, experience the ups and downs of life, but remain unaffected by the pains and torments that attachment and aversion bring to unenlightened beings. The correct practice of meditation will keep you in an ocean of enlightened mind that will allow you to pass freely through all of your experiences in a state of bliss. Even the normal pains that come from your physical body and mental emotions will be greatly reduced by the constant experience of inner enlightenment you will derive from the correct practice of daily meditation. Learn to meditate well, practice, follow the advice of the true tantric masters, and you too will pass beyond suffering and enter into eternal happiness, bliss, ecstasy, and higher states of enlightenment, states for which there are no words.